from ordinary, I mean, from sickness to health. That's why in African medicine, I am coming to realize or to come with the hypothesis that Africans do not pursue health in healing. Health, physical health, social, all this health is not part of African medicine. The real goal of African medicine is holism towards healing of the spirit. And if it is holistic in its content, it definitely must be spiritual. And this is where the problem is. It is not easy or possible for the scientists, for scientific-minded people, or from the Western Eurocentric people to understand traditional medicine. When you understand this holistic dimension of medicine, you will see the need for the spiritualism as very essential to traditional African medicine. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for the insightful presentation. I so much enjoyed it. And thank you for bringing to the fore the traditional understanding of what constitutes spiritualism. And during the course of your presentation, I was able to appreciate how you were able to situate spiritualism as a methodological issue. And you were able to acknowledge the fact that spiritualism differs from the Western conception of health and healing. And the synergy that which you created on spirit and matter is a really fascinating one. So to this end, once again, I appreciate your presentation. At the moment, we now invite the second speaker, Dr. Akin-Otiko, for his presentation. Permit me to introduce Dr. Akin-Otiko to us. He is a senior research fellow in the Institute of African and Diaspora Studies at the University of Lagos. And so far, his interest has been on spiritualism, culture, and tradition. So over to you, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Do you want me to share my slide or
Please go ahead, sir.
Okay. I'm very delighted to be here today, and as just an introduction, the first speaker, there's no way I will start my presentation without doing what I want to do. The first speaker is he was my supervisor at my PhD level. And so I always would want to let people know that. And I always also would want to say he's a great man. His mind is very apt. I mean, there are things he gets into that I do not understand, not to even think of getting into them. Can you see my screen now? Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, lovely. So my name is Akinmayowa Akin-Otiko. I do research in the Institute of African Diaspora Studies, University of Lagos. And I've got 20 minutes. So I'm not going to say a whole lot. I'm just going to stir the water a bit and have us do a bit of reflection on that. What I'm doing this afternoon is I'm going to do a historical discourse on the roles of religion and traditional medicine. And to do that, I'm going to be saying, to do that, I want to begin by pointing out these following things as my background. I'll do a background, and then I will do an introduction, and then the history, and I'm very aware that I'm speaking to historians, the history of traditional medicine in Africa, as well as the history of Christianity and the religion of the Africans, is very similar. Christianity has always had an influence on both the religion and the medicine of the Africans. And Christianity has, for the most part, spoken and defined what is now understood and accepted as the tradition, as the religion and the culture and the medicine of the Africans. Here, I'm referring to traditional medicine as what WHO has defined as the sum total of knowledge or practice, whether explainable or unexplainable, used in diagnosing, preventing, and eliminating physical, mental, and social diseases, which may be exclusively to on past experience or observable. And that's a lot of what Professor Jegede was talking about. The beautiful thing about the topic that I have been given is there is a distinction that can be made between religion and medicine. Because if you're asking me to speak to the role of religion on medicine, it means we all have set out to say there are two things, and I do agree with that. So the background to this study is that I'm going to be looking at the history of traditional medicine in Africa, and I'm going to be looking at how the religions, Christianity, and in particular, the religion found among the Yorubas, how these two religions have affected the practice of traditional medicine. So that sets the background for what I'm going to be discussing in very, very quick succession. Now, the key to understand what I'm going to be doing this evening are two. To be able to understand the table that I'm going to be sharing with you, there are two key elements that would help in understanding that. The first one is to understand the levels of practice in the traditional medicine, and also to understand what disease etiology is. By etiology, I mean causation. So in traditional medicine, there are 4 levels of practice. The first one is general, which will pass for the first aid. The things that can be found that is usually known by everybody. I mean, it's common knowledge. And within this sphere, you have things that are usually given to children when the weather is changing. And of course, you have accidents that happen at home. People know what leaves to pluck to stop bleeding. You know what happens when somebody gets into convulsion, you know what to do. So that's at the general level. So traditional medicine is practiced at that very, very simplistic level, where it sounds more like a first aid level. Now, the second level where traditional medicine is practiced is where you have those that retail herbal products, and those are the Eleweyomos. Here, they know botany, they know groupings, they know the functions, they know the active agents. And so they can respond to basic ailments like fever, jaundice, body pain, of course, aphrodisia. So at that level, they know the kind of herbs, they know what to do, and they handle those. They are not professional healthcare givers. They are just knowledgeable person who retail herbal materials. At the third level, and very importantly, this is where you have the professionals. And here, they will pass for trained, knowledgeable healthcare providers. And they have a knowledge of what is to be used. They have a knowledge of diagnosis. And so they are able to take care. They will pass for practitioners at the primary health care. Of course, they have different areas of competence. You have bone setters, you have traditional birth attendants, and you have those that are into detailed. So we've spoken about the 3 levels. There's a 4th level. The 4th level is where you have the diviners and the healers. These are the Shawo Shishigun. It's at this point where, if you go back to the definition of World Health Organization regarding traditional medicine, you will see that part of traditional medicine is explainable, part of it is not explainable. Not explainable because it is mystery, not explainable because it is also those things that do not follow the categories that you find in Western healthcare. So that's the first important thing that we all need to keep in mind as I go through what I'm doing. The second key and very important thing is the understanding of disease etiology in traditional medicine. Now, Anderson and Foster, as early as the late 70s, have been talking about categories in understanding disease causation in traditional medicine. And we can broadly group them. Of course, Jegede also in 2010 had talked about some of these categorizations. And so you have naturally that are explainable. So the first 3 levels, you have diseases that are understood, that have natural causations, and their causes and treatments are explainable. At the 4th level, which is not explainable, because you have witches, you have mystery, you have all kinds of causations that are understood and accepted in traditional medicine, and there are only diviners who can respond to that. So it's important to keep these 2 things, the levels of practice and then disease causation, as I move on to the proper discussion of the influence of these religions. Now, this table, I hope you can see, this table speaks to different eras. It speaks to how these religions have affected traditional medicine. Now, the middle table is traditional medicine, and if you look through it, you'll see that it has not changed. Now, the variables are Adimula, which is the religion found among the Yorubas, and Christianity, and that's what I'm explaining in this table. Now, in the pre-colonial time, Christianity, of course, had no influence because it had not existed among the Africans. Now, there are 2 very significant things happen with the religion of the Africans. There is an acknowledgement and acceptance, a celebration of the 2 patrons of, and I'm narrowing it down to Yoruba medicine, the Osoyin and the Orunmila. Now, Osoyin is responsible for the first 3 levels of practice. Orunmila is responsible for the last level of practice, which is divination, spirituality, and all of that. That's where you find that level. And so the religion of the Africans have accepted those elements in traditional medicine, and they have always given grounds for them. Now, when it got to the colonial era, of course, the religion of the Africans remained consistent. It accepted, promoted, celebrated, explained. Christianity came, and Christianity negated all 4 levels. Christianity during the colonial time came and it negated all 4 levels because as it rejected everything that was African, it rejected the medicine found in Africa as well. Jesus was presented as the healer of all, and Western medicine that was part of the baggage of colonialism was also presented as a solution for health. Now, in the post-colonial era, something very different happened. Of course, the religion of the Africans held on to the practice of the Africans. So all 4 levels were still supported. But in the post-colonial era, it became necessary to recognize multiple disease etiology found among the Africans. And so it was difficult for Christianity to dismiss all those levels of healthcare. And so there was an acceptance of traditional medicine at the post-colonial level, but there was a rejection of the fourth level. The fourth level, ipso facto, was against the teaching of Christianity. And so, because it was impossible to dismiss the reality of healthcare, because every culture had healthcare, Christianity recognized that. And so, all they could do was to dismiss the fourth level. And that's where the big problem lies. That yes, you have care in the first, second, and the third level of traditional medicine, but you have something that is fetish that should not be accepted because it does not tally with Christianity. And so the fourth level is dismissed. However, the interesting thing in the post-colonial era was that Christianity could not respond to those conditions that the fourth level took care of. Conditions of witchcraft, conditions of not having money, conditions that required holistic care. And so even though people had become Christians, traditional religion created a so-called alternative where people would go back to, even though they are still Christians, but they will go back to those space for care. Now, in a contemporary time, and this is very important, the religion of Africans have not changed its status and its acceptance of these levels of care. But Christianity now has moved from the acceptance of 3 levels. It has dropped to the acceptance of 2 levels. So it accepts the general practice, which anybody can take care of first aid. It accepts the second level. And I remember several times I've had discussions with people who would, by the very fact of something called herbal, would not want to use it. But these days you have Christianity accepting herbal care. But Christianity has refused the third and the fourth level. And that is the influence of Christianity. The third level, not because it is fetish, but it is, Christianity has a baggage of Western care. And so when you compare Western care to the third level of practice, Christianity rejects it on the basis of capacity. And so it looks at it and it says it is not capable. It has not technologically evolved enough to give care. It says it is not good enough to care. And so it's on that basis that Christianity rejects it and prefers Western care. And of course, they carried on the rejection of the post-colonial era into the contemporary time of the fourth level, because the fourth level still does not adhere to the teachings of Christianity. And so you find in all this era, the influence of Christianity on traditional medicine. Now, this becomes a big problem, particularly now that you do not discuss healthcare without discussing multiplicity of methods of care. A multiplicity of methods of care should not be based on faith. It should be based on what is functional, what is available, what is efficient, what is available within the context of the people. Now, I give you this food for thought as I go to get close to the end of this. I just want to raise up some questions, and during conversation, we can get into it. So there are 3 basic things that I would like us to keep in mind. One, as historians, it's important for you to know that practitioners, especially Western practitioners of medicine, that you must recognize the multiple layer of disease etiology in traditional medicine. Diseases are not caused by natural causes alone. There are other causes recognized in the practice of traditional medicine that may not feature in a category of Western practice. The second thing I'd like us to keep in mind as historians and as health practitioners is that there is plurality of methods, because one method is limited. There is no one method that fully takes care of the holistic care that anyone needs. And here we need a complementarity of methods, and that is important. And third thing, and very significantly, is that we must learn to reject what Christianity shoves down our throats. Christianity says yes to exclusive pluralism. And what do I mean by that? Yes, there must be multiple methods of healthcare, but these methods must conform to Christian standards. And so you're saying, yes, we understand that pluralism of methods is the way to go, but we also are saying that for it to be good enough, it must be acceptable to the teachings and doctrines of Christianity. And that is where the big problem lies. That is where we need to begin to give consent to what Christianity, the role Christianity has played in traditional medicine. So yes, multiple levels of care is the way to go, and this should not be done at the expense of advancement of technology. And what do I mean by that? Traditional medicine must embrace technology, but it must not change its essence. The essence is what helps it to practice at those 4 levels and the 4th level may not clearly appear within the context of Western medicine. And so, yes, the best that can be done is to recognize this multiplicity, recognize this multi-layered in the praxis, and also recognize the ability that is within the indigenous practice. So we have the value of hindsight and history to build upon, to know that every community, every culture has got a health care, to also understand that what exists in African traditional medicine is a holistic approach, even though they are layered, but they are a holistic approach. And one thing as a roundup is that traditional medicine has held on to this traditional way of doing things. And the traditional way of doing things does not translate to inability, does not translate to inefficiency, it just translates to it is traditional medicine. Thank you for listening. I hope we can do some mind rubbing as the questions section progresses. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akin-Otiko, for the beautiful presentation. Thank you for bringing for the level of practice in African traditional medicine, and as well giving insight into the etiology of diseases in African within the African context. I also enjoyed your perspective on the idea of medical pluralism within the Christianity framework. So I now leave the ball rolling now to the participants. Please let us know, and please, when you be asking any question, kindly make sure that there is no noise in your background. Thank you very much.
Right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Right. Obafemi Jegede. Remember, yes, we met about 2 weeks ago in a small get together at. Remember what the last discussion?
I'm trying to remember. I can't.
You should be able to remember. Or just about 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago. Yeah, and also Akin-Otiko. It's about 3 years ago we met. Now, my question is this. You see, I'm a metaphysician, philosopher and metaphysician, and I know that you cannot mix 2 epistemic orientations. The development of the orientation we have in tradition took thousands of years. So also the development of the ratio scientific epistemic orientation took thousands of years too. the roots are in the Bible. You could see that. You could already see in the Bible the Mosaic system hugely against witchcraft and other things. So let's not go into that history. So the question, the thing then is, you have two different approaches, and it doesn't seem to me that they can mix. Of course, people can borrow from one way, borrow aspects of this or the other, but mixing them for a practitioner is going to be very difficult, because you are not applying the same fundamental metaphysical assumptions. You're not applying the same methodologies, and you're not going to be able to arrive at the same conclusions. So mixing is out of the question. What can happen is that a practitioner might be able to borrow from one system ideas and integrate according to the canons of the system that he wants to integrate them into. That's what I mean. That's what I'm looking at. Because if you say, for example, spirituality, for a scientific-oriented mind, what you call spirituality can be reduced to force fields. Okay, let's take one example, one practical example in medicine. For many years, we speak of Abiku and Ogbanje, right? But we now see today that a good deal of what we call Abiku and Ogbanje is explainable in terms of sickle cell. Okay, for many years we talk of influences of witchcraft in a sense, but we can see that these are electromagnetic forces that people generate and apply to other people. So if you understand electromagnetism, you'll be able to understand what witchcraft means and address it. So you're looking at two different frameworks, and what is called spiritual in one system can be fully understood in another system by any means. So therefore, when we speak of pluralism, my question then to Dr. Jegede is this: can you, when you say something is spiritual, does it preclude a materialist explanation? Materialist not simply in terms of physics, in terms of physical things that you can touch, but in terms of things like force fields, which you cannot touch. Okay? In terms of things like electromagnetism, which are not physical. Which in terms of atoms and particles that are actually not visible. Okay? And for Dr. Akin-Otiko, you have a challenge when you speak of bringing two epistemic orientations together, because both of them are ultimately based in faith, based in metaphysical commitments that are divergent. And so you have a fundamental problem there. Both the Western scientific approach is based on fundamental metaphysical assumptions that are actually in many ways opposed to that of African tradition. So it's not simply a matter of bringing, kind of easily picking up two things, but a challenge of faith. Both systems are based on faith. And if those faiths have contrary assumptions and directions, then you're going to have a challenge. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much for your question, please. I wouldn't know, maybe you want to respond to it, Dr. Jegede or Dr. Akinmayowa, or do you want us to go ahead and take some other question?
How do you want it? Let me just, because I can forget. That's why it's good to respond. Let me, you see, it's an ontological chasm, or what you call epistemological chasm. Epistemological chasm. That is the body of African epistemology. All that you have been saying, I can assure you, were undercurrent by your epistemology, your orientation as a metaphysical physician. Let me tell you the truth. By my own experience, I'm talking based on experience with Babalawo, more than 28 years of encounters with them. Everything is spiritual. The idea of material does not even exist at all. I say it unequivocally. The world is spiritual. Life is spiritual. The physical that we see, what do we even see? We see nothing. We see really, there's nothing that we see, because what is beyond what we see is far, far, far more than what we see. So if we see what you don't see, you will not see what you see eventually. If you see what you don't see, you will not see what you see. That's why traditional medicine will go into the essence. Your whole being is spiritual. You are a spiritual being. You are not a physical being. Everything is spiritual. And this is how African man thinks. And this is what guides his medical epistemology. Thank you.
Response, and I think we can take 2-3 questions in a row, but let me just quickly respond to this. I thank you very much, Professor Wakoba. I think we met in Beirut before COVID. There is some show of arrogance that science displays when it wants to discuss things that are beyond it. And I think it requires humility to speak from a positionality and say, from my positionality, this is not explainable yet. Now, the concept of Abiku is Abiku. There is no way to explain it and say there's gene, there's no, absolutely not.
It's not sickle cell.
It's not.
It's not sickle cell.
There are two categories, and one way we have made a lot of mistakes is we have taken categories where we're comfortable with, and we have imposed them on what we do not know. And I think it's time for us to recognize pluralism is the way to go. And pluralism is simply saying that this is how much I know, and there is so much more that I do not know that occurs somewhere else. And I think that's where we need to be. Witchcraft is not electromagnetism. It is not. Absolutely not. There is that. So where we get to is where we take one and dismiss the other. We should take one, celebrate one, and recognize that others exist. And that is exactly what we say when we discuss pluralism of methods of health care. What Western healthcare can do is very apt and very relevant. There are quite a number of things that traditional medicine handles that Western medicine has no clue about. I was teaching my students today about referral methods. And for those that speak Yoruba, there is a formal referral method. And that is from the practitioner to the Western healthcare. That's known, that's written, that's celebrated. There is an informal referral method where those Western practitioners will say, Elofiowo Ileto. It is not written. No one makes reference to it, but it's part of our reality. When they get to this, they say, oh, no, you know, this one, you have to go pray about it. That is just a mild way of saying go traditional about it. So basically what we're saying here is Western medicine is lovely. It's doing very well. It's growing. Why that is happening, there's so much happening in traditional medicine. And we must recognize those levels of expertise. It is recognizing those levels of expertise that we will be able to know that. When we speak about all of these things, we speak from a positionality. And I think when we get into a forum like this, we should recognize that the positionalities are just positionalities. It makes us limited in the things that we say, makes us limited in places we say. And that is why I would say I'm speaking from the point of a practitioner who has understudied people like Dr. Jegede and who are understudying practitioners in the field. And they do not mince words, and they have no clouds in their minds as to their practice, as to their expertise, as to the capacities and what they do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sirs, for the responses. Please, let's make our question very brief. So I call on Benson. Apology if I did not respectfully pronounce your name.
Oh, thank you, Bensi. Yeah, Professor Jegede, thank you, and Dr. Akinmayowa. Yeah, I listened very carefully to your presentations. I think from where Professor Joseph stopped, yeah, there is still an epistemic a gap between what is done and the result we are celebrating in traditional medicine. Yes, you do one thing, but we do not know how that one thing results in what we are celebrating. And so we say this is the result, and the result is practical, is tangible, and we can also celebrate it. My challenge has to come from the perspective of decolonization, and Dr. Akin and I, we've been on this. And that aspect of decolonization is that these metaphysical things we are talking about in African medicine, it is high time we began to bring them into the technology so that African medicine, African ways of healing can also be made tangible. That tangibility, how do we achieve it? That's my question. Thank you.
Samuel, please, can you ask the question?
Yes. Thanks very much. I'm Samuel from Ghana, KNUST. I've really enjoyed the presentation, and it's very strong. And I think that there are a few issues I want to maybe highlight, because I'm also reflecting on the conversation. I'm asking, are we also not looking at the fact that there are issues also connected to medical dualism as against pluralism in that construct, so that when the second professor spoke, tagged on 4 items, and to a point, Western-oriented ideals or philosophy of thinking seem to rather support the general, the retailing class, and possibly, if you like, the trained. But I say this because what has been seen in Africa historically is that we've seen Judeo-Christian influence, Islamic influence, historically also seeping into the kind of practices that we have seen in the definition or attempt to define what is traditional medicine. Give you an example: non-herbal medicines like the use of talisman, for example. Where I come from in Ghana, in Asante, historically, our chiefs and kings have used that to ward off evil spirits. Sorry, my earpiece went off. To ward off evil spirits and all that. So the question is that, so the use of talismanic powers, right, which is quite an Islamic, clearly an Islamic influence, came into the sphere. So you have seen that level of impact from, if you like, Arabian Islamic construct. So it seems to me that the kind of medicine or practice, right, that we have seen in the continent for centuries has also engaged other philosophies and thinking over time. And that is why if you look at the activities of the Europeans, either in Nigeria or Ghana or Sierra Leone or Gambia or Senegambia generally, the idea was to systematically push away the traditional notions and thinking about our own healing traditions. For example, Cruikshank, discussed and said that the the diviner or the African healer was a rogue and typically referred to him as a thief because he had enormous power and control over his society. So broadly, I think there are issues of contestations, if you are looking at it from how we are construing our discussions, also about medical dualism and pluralism, because the Western traditions are not necessarily interested in healing as it pertains to divine healing. However, they are interested in those forms which have metamorphosed and taken on Western biomedical orientations. And that is what we look at also today, because when we discuss about efficacy, the question is not only about efficacy in the forms of divine healing, but whether they can be empirically tested in laboratories and all that. So there are a lot of debates that are coming up. Are we supposed to hold the two extreme thoughts together in a medically dualistic environment? Or are we saying that in a plural system, we need to also push for advocacy for our government to say that, like in the case of Ghana, the psychic and herbal unions have their own ways of also driving their practices. Give you COVID as an example. COVID-19 came and the discussion was as if Africa had no healing. Africa had no traditions. Africa could not contribute to the narrative. And so when in Ghana, we were able to come out with Nimiba, for example, and it was really curing people, it was not a national and a global discussion because we have always allowed a certain open field for that conversation, which seems to jettison African traditions and orientations and philosophies. And that's what I want to put across. Maybe a thought and not a question per se. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, B.A. Mulemu.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm happy to follow from Nairobi. I was just invited in my email, and this is a very interesting topic. I could see that I thank the presenters, the first presenter and second presenter, and then there's the two commentators. Yeah, like what Adu has said, which actually almost sums my thought. It's really a heavy topic, so that you may not have enough time to say what you want to say. But I want to pick from where the first questions have come, and then I see how to see whether it gives us a different perspective. One, I want to ask about whether in this discussion we are also considering the continuum between cure and healing. And where do we place now the realization even of the WHO after Second World War, when they reoriented the definition of health? And I think that's a realization that should be recognized in this kind of discussion, where we cannot say Western science is everything. We could even talk about African science. But of course, most of the time people think about when they want to demean the science of other nations, they call it ethnoscience. And you see, we want to place now African ethnomedicine in the context of Western ethnomedicine. And we say that really African ethnomedicine should be able to contribute to global medicine. So my point is that I want clarification from our first presenter, Dr. Jegede, about this continuum. You see, the spiritual and the physical. Where do you place other practitioners who seem to be removing things from the bodies of human beings? If we said that our healing, African healing, is not tangible, but like maybe in East Africa, we know of practitioners who actually do practical. Or they can also be trying to make you feel that they have some physical object in their bodies which they want to remove. So we want to think about placing this in the continuum of physical and spiritual, because I liked your reference, Dr. Jegede, about the notion of seeing. Even in African divination, people say, I have not seen the illness. So there are different levels of seeing. I think there is a spiritual seeing and the and the physical seeing, because I think from our own discussion, they say that, you know, seeing is to be subjected to high levels of technical object, like microscopes. That is scientific, but there's another another level which should be taken to be spiritual seeing. And I think there should be no contradiction between Christianity and African healing as such, because even in the Jewish tradition, even Jesus himself, he was healing, and he was being even accused to declare where he was getting his powers. So there's no contradiction, because I don't think Christianity per se contradicts African healing. Okay, my other question is about the continuum between, I like the discussion about hot and cold. Dr. Jegede, maybe you could highlight, why is it that hot means chaos, yet hotness and warmth means health? And how come then when somebody is dying, maybe the temperatures are high, they are cooled down, and yet when they die, they become cold forever, you know, they become cold forever and they have died in that sense. So another thing, another question I want to highlight very quickly, basing on what Adu has said, is about, I was keen to listen. We glorify Christianity and try to underrate the fact that there was Islam in Africa. Expect that even from the Europe and West Africa. How is the interaction between African medicine and Islam and Christianity? And how do we put the African pragmatism in the choice of medicine, even in the current society, whereby they pragmatically choose? And I like the idea that has been given by Professor Otiko about this pragmatism and epistemologies. I don't think the epistemologies are contradictory, but Africans choose pragmatically between the epistemologies. And I like the idea of pluralism, because when people want to demean African medicine, they want to call it traditional medicine, and then they glorify others as alternative or complementary medicine. So we need to think about that in that sense. So I think what I'm pointing out is about the Christianity and then the variants of African traditional medicine. Because when you talk about African medicine or African cultures, is it right for us to talk about African medicine in singular, African medicine? So that when we are referring to Yoruba medicine, we may think it is exactly the same as the Fulani medicine. How do we account for the variations that makes the Fulani and the Yoruba want to interact in terms of their own epistemological orientations? I hope that gives a point of my interjection with regard to what I need to be clarified in the discussion. Yeah, thank you very much. If I had more time, I'd ask more. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your question. Please let us keep our question very brief and concise. We'll take 2 more questions, then our speakers will respond to them. Tai Akisumi, can you please ask a question?
Zoom meeting window. Alert audio.
I hope you can hear me though. Can you hear me?
Alert
Clearly, please.
Can you hear me though? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, very
Okay,
clearly.
well, can I first of all give an apology that you will hear some noise at the background? That is my narrator, my computer. I have some imperfection in my vision. Oh, thank you for taking my question. Now, I have a unique experience. I'm not going to tell you a story. I had a polio at the age of 5. It affected my vision. At the age of 12, I started using caliper shoe to walk around. I don't believe in miracle because I took it off one day and I never wear it again. Now, I then developed, according to my GP in England, he said I'm now a diabetic. Then I've got a detached retina in my eye at the age of 17. I developed glaucoma at age of 60. Okay, so Do I have to blame God for all this? I don't believe so, because he gave me the strength to actually be able to participate in what you're doing today, because then I managed to go through my education. He actually strengthened me. Now, I refer to a note I posted early about being a consultant. We have a research project called Faith Healer, which is similar to both speakers as mentioned. Faith Healer is a Tavistock Institute, which was done 20 years ago. Now, what are we looking for? We're looking for healing without medication. And what is the time of reference? The time of reference was simply to save the NHS £500 million every month. So it's not about the faith. But what we discover accidentally is that faith actually does heal. We were trying to see if people who believe in neo-medicine did not need to be getting a prescription, which they never use. So we want to save money. And that is how we stumble. So we have an IFA priest, which is a lecturer at Leicester University here in England. And we got somebody who introduced us as Babalawo. We got Babalawo is a herbalist, which is my great-grandfather's occupation. And my own dad is a bishop. So you see, so I have this unique experience in all these things, and I only believe in God. So whatever we're trying to come across or what we're trying to find out here is always there. I believe it's faith. What is the meaning of the word faith? In the Bible, it says to you something that you behold that you did not see, but you believe in it. The same thing with the traditional medicine. I think they can work hand with hand. It's just about your belief in what works for you. I know if I got headache, I use aspirin. It worked for me. Sometimes I drink ordinary water. It works for me. So what I want to learn from these two speakers is this: how can these two issues be put together and work hand in hand for what works for you? Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your question. For the speaker, do you want to respond now, or you want us to take like 3 more questions?
All right, I could just run through the ones that pertain to me. Thank you, Professor Gbonyi. It's a good question. To respond to that, why can't Africans make their tradition, their medicine, their religion, why can't we just put them into, let me just quickly read WHO, World Health Organization's definition of traditional medicine. And I'll stress the parts that I need us to hold on to. The sum total of knowledge of practices, whether explicable, that's important, or inexplicable. That's very, very significant. Now, where I am with knowledge and epistemology is that I do not consider difference as less or inferior. Difference just means difference. If it is different, it's different. It's just the way they do their thing. So when we begin to, now I work with practitioners who today have got to deal with NAFDAC, SON, and all of those things. And I tell them, I said, what you guys are buying into is you're struggling not to be who you are. You have to be who you are. There was a time when they said traditional medicine was shrouded in mystery. Now we're no longer saying it's shrouded in mystery. We're saying, oh, you can learn it. There was a time that traditional medicine was seen as fetish. Now, with the definition that some part of medicine will not be explainable, and it doesn't make them less. It just makes them different. And until we get to that point where it gets to traditional African medicine, we know that that area can only be explained by the practitioner. And it doesn't make it less scientific. It just means that it requires a different categorization. Now, we did speak to the issue of talisman and Islamic medicine because what I was asked to speak to were the context of Christianity and African religion. Of course, every religion has a disposition towards medicine. Of course, the Arabians had a disposition to talisman, and when they came with Islam, it came with it. So all of these things are, when we talk about the progression from cure to healing, I mean, it's a process. So you cure what is visible, and then the healing is entirely. And that's one of the things that Professor Jegede has stressed. You're holistic. So when I do not have money to spend, I'm not well. My mind is not well. And so there's something that can be done that will help me to feed. And that is part of medicine. So Christianity has got some kind of method that it embraces. So does Islam. So yes, we speak to not dualism of methods. We speak to plurality of methods. And then finally, we can speak about African traditional medicine in multiples. Multiples because experience has shown that there are some diseases that are very, very endemic in different contexts. And there is a theory that is gaining the ground that says that every disease has something that can either cure it or prevent it wherever it's found. And so there are practitioners who are disposed to those contexts. And so in Africa, we have multiples, even though we have a generic because of the location, but you have, in the next couple of months, I'll be in Kenya to study the Maasai, to see what they do, and to compare it to what the Ibori people do in Kano. You know, so we have multiple methods of care. And this comes, you may have similarity in the epistemology, in the procedures, but you have multiplicity in terms of what is used. I mean, the same malaria is treated in different ways. So that can speak to multiplicity. Infertility is responded to in different ways. So that can speak to multiplicity. I think that's about what I have to say in response to all the questions that came. Thank you.
Yeah, you have actually answered most of the questions. Just to know where you stopped, let me just build upon it. For example, when we talk about multiplicity of practice, some of these plants, for example, Ewe Jere, which is a Momodika, here in Yoruba land, it is used for mainly anti-pie, really anti-pie. When you get to Igbo land, they do not know it as anti-pie plants. They know it as medicine plants for hypertension in Igbo land. Other places, even this bitter leaf we all loud talk about. Elsewhere, it is used for something else. It depends on their orientation. But I think the bottom line is that it is indigenous to the people. If it is Fulani medicine, Igbo medicine, so far it is connected with a people, then we can say that that is where it is the same. Let me answer the question regarding hot and cold, especially when a person eats in Yoruba, you know, means something that is bad. Bona, in fact, when it is an epidemic, we call it Igona. Coronavirus was a kind of Igona, which is it. And when somebody dies, that person gets cold, not cool. There's a difference between cold and cool. Somebody who's dead is always cold. It's never cool. And let us compare it with the water inside pot. It's always cold. The water, I mean, always cool. The water inside fridge is always cold. So that is where, if it is warm, yes, there is warmth. Warmth is not bad, but not when it is hot. And when it is cold, it's bad. It can be cool. So we still want to confirm the fact that the indigenous people's way of diagnosis, places a lot on the feelings, cold, the idea of cold and hot. Then I think I cannot say a word on this issue of tangibility. Tangibility. Okay, this is just the button of the eye, the button of the physical. The physical is so misleading, so imposing, that we allow the physical to guide us so much that we do the overemphasis on the physical blindfolds us from the spiritual. In traditional medicine, the emphasis on the physical is just to enable them get to the spiritual. It is just a gateway to the spiritual, because the spiritual is the real essence, while the physical is just functional, just an instrument in the hand of the spiritual. So the essence, the reality, therefore, the truth or the tangible, therefore, is the spiritual. So the burden of wanting to make it look scientific will lead us to the same reductionism. We will continue to wallow in the Western scientific epistemology, and we will never be able to come up with what is truly Africa. And I wish that many of us go into the kind of ethnography that I do. I sleep with Babalawo, I sleep with Orisha, deities. I'm talking out of what I have seen. African medicine is inherently spiritual. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We now take like 3 more questions in this order. First, starting with Omolara, then to Dr. Oke and Obi. Over to Omolara, please.
A big thank you to the organizers of this seminar. Thank you so much. I also appreciate Professor Jegede and Dr. Akinmayowa for their highly informative and interesting delivery. It has really broadened my horizon with regards to traditional African medicine. Now, I am neither acknowledging or refuting the potency of traditional medicine or spiritual healing. What I want to ask is, what are the traditionalists or the spiritualists doing about the bastardization, so to say, of this traditional medicine? Many ascribing to themselves powers that they do not possess to lure and defraud innocent African patients who truly believe in traditional medicine, or the SLA that Dr. Akinmayowa mentioned. Many patients have come with worsened clinical conditions because some babalawo somewhere has sat on them, claiming to be able to heal them of their ailments and pushing them out. Outside, they must have drained them of all their money and belongings. I remember vividly a woman who has had CS twice and was told we need CS again for her 4th pregnancy. But she was convinced somewhere by one Iyabi that goats and sheep deliver without knives, and that she would deliver to without having to go through CS again. Of course, she came in with a ruptured uterus, and eventually both mother and baby were lost. So how do we draw the line, sirs? And what can be done to actually portray the African traditional method of treatment in a better light? Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for organizing this discourse. It's very enlightening. Yes, I also join my words with that of my chief, Auntie Omolara. Yeah, Africa, I believe, has a lot of resources, herbs, petroleum and so on, and other things, even from the soil, which I believe God has endowed us with, so that we will be able to help our health and process our healing. And I also agree to one of the speakers that our resources should be able to help us in terms of our health. I believe so. The barks of tree, the leaves, and so on. But concerning the fourth estate of African traditional medicine practice, as explained, I believe that many people find it difficult to accept this fourth estate, but possibly because a few of us have alternative in Christianity and Islam and other religions, as has been explained. Now, I think the issue with acceptance of that is because that fourth estate is largely practiced in secretive. Nobody knows what is done there, as it were. It appears that it's not open to constructive criticism, as it were. People hardly are allowed to talk about it, to ask questions about how it is done, as against what is done in Islam and Christianity and maybe some other modern religions. Again, that fourth estate is also having some challenges in acceptability because, for instance, now, people ascribe a lot of powers and prowess to, let's say, Ogun, for instance, Shango, for instance, and say, and that is what the people at that fourth estate do. They relate more to the gods. That's what makes them to be different from the first, second, and third estate, as it were explained. And in my own belief, I think, for example, Shango was a king in Oyo Kingdom. I also believe maybe that Shango was not worshipped when he was alive, and neither did he ask anybody to worship him. Now, when we are now being, encouraged to do that, to have a goddessing in the fourth estate, that's what possibly will make many people to refrain and not believe in such, because many of the things that, as rightly said by last speaker, are being done there have scientific basis, and they have been proven, as against this encouragement that will come from the practitioners of this fourth estate of the African practice. Again, finally, I want to thank the organizers again. I want to encourage that African traditional medicine should find a way of making the practice more scientific, that experiments can be done, research can be done, and then results can be given. I would not want to agree with the fact that if we go in the way of the Western world of scientificism, that is going to affect African medicine practice badly. But rather, we encourage that we should make it evidence-based, so that everybody can, rally around. For example, it was said that a particular leaf is known to do different works and known for different in different regions of the same country. That shouldn't be. Experiences should be shared. It should be open. It should be scientifically proven, and so on. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Over to you, Obi.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Yeah. My name is Ola Busari, and my background, I was born in a family of what I jokingly normally say Chrislam Hab, the Christian, Islam, and the Herbalists. And in fact, in my youth, I used to write accounts for our old Herbalists, when they are about to change from the old account, the cursive handwriting into a modern one. So I know a little bit about all those things, and I have people practice in my home, in my house. But it baffles me sometimes when I see things that are inexplicable, and I ask them, they just have to shred everything in secrecy. And I happen to, with my mates and co who engage in it or take it as inheritance from their forefathers, I challenge them, because sometimes they will come and tell me, oh, because I was running the transportation business, and they told me that, okay, they can lock my car with agadagudo, for people who are Yoruba people who understand. And I told them, I want you to do it. At least it won't hurt me. It will only hurt my car. If you can do it, I will take you to London, and you go and perform it in London, and then it becomes a business to us. I've seen people who brag to me that, listen, I can do Ifunpa, that when they shoot you a gun, it won't affect you. I'll say, okay, let me when you do it, I want you to put it on your neck or your arm, and let me shoot you. He said, I'm joking. He doesn't want to do it. And if you can do it, as successful, I would take it to London, we'll be making money. Oyinbo people are ready to buy all those things if we do them in multiplication. So my question now is that, and regarding to one of the speakers, because I'm on the realm of level 3 and 4, which is more higher level. I believe in the traditional herbs like curing and co. But when it go to level 3 and 4, or sewing, and then Ifa and co, and whatever, I realized that when Christian pastor, even if it's enshrined in the Bible that Jesus cast devil from a multitude into the shrine, into the pigs, into the swine, yeah. But if Jesus can do that, and a pastor can do it nowadays, and we see them as holy people, but if our people will do it, for example, if my herbalist will cast an evil spirit from a girl to a swine, they will be running away from him as a bad person because he's been baptized. What stops us from experimenting things for people to see? Because our own generation now, they are seeing is believing. So in the area of one of the speakers that said, oh, there is something that you can use to invite somebody from abroad and come home. I'm challenging people that I want people to use it to me and let us see if it's going to work. We want experiment. That, seeing is believing, like what is said. What has made us not to be able to make everything more open, rather than shred everything in secrecy? When you get to a point, you just stop and say, "One billion more." You don't need to ask. Just whatever. I come from a town where if I mention my town, people say, Ogbologbo ni imbe. But I don't see no Ogbologbo there. Everything, even my people from my hometown, we want to say, if you need a good medicine, you have to go to Elisha. When you go to Elisha will say, go to Osogbo. Osogbo, we should go back to my hometown. Who is deceiving who? Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to appreciate the organizers of this seminar, and I must say that I've learned a lot from the questions and answers from the speakers. My question is this: I've been reading some works on this debate on decolonizing medicine or decolonizing global health, and my question remains that how, with some of these issues we have been considering, talking about secrecy, the fact that also that indigenous African knowledge systems are not, let me say, well packaged enough for acceptance on a global stage. How do we now expect Africans to contribute to global health, to contribute to global health challenges? How do we also make our own crafts accessible, usable, and for other people? Let me just put my question that way. Thank you.
Yeah, can I respond?
Can I please ask my question? I wasn't able to put it up. Can I please ask a question, comment, please? Can I?
Please ask.
Sorry, my name is Bukola Adekoya Fagbenle. I'm a medical herbalist. I trained in England, and I'm currently doing a PhD. And Dr. Jegede is my. I thank you both for this seminar, and I thank the organizers too. The two speakers, two people I revere so much, and definitely I'm looking forward to meeting Dr. Otiko in the future. Now, what also always baffles me is our seemingly need to try and prove ourselves to the Western world. We have so much, and we're so endowed that we don't need to prove anything to anyone. Can we come back to where we started again? Can we just appreciate and truly understand what we have? And I'm not talking about metaphysical. I'm talking about even healing herbs that heal. That's obvious that they heal. My PhD is on diabetes and the use of herbs in treating it, using according to the Yoruba therapeutics. And part of that is actually explaining how diabetes, okay, with the Western world is an endocrine systems, malady. But within the Yoruba epistemology, we can say that they can actually send atogbe to you, diabetes to you. Somebody can actually send it to you and you have it. Now, how do we explain that? So we have so many things to do. We have too many questions to answer. We have so much to do that we should not be burdened down with all this trying to prove ourselves every time, right? We must go back to looking at what works and how we can put that into our own thesis, our own theories, our own science, African science, whatever you want to call it. Not ethno-science, thank you, please. Do not deride us. Our own science that makes sense to us. And that means working from the ground, from the foundation upwards, asking the local people, indigenous people, what works? What have we seen that works? And how can we take it further to help our people? All right, and I mean that, and I'm not trying to be discriminatory in any way. I mean, we should start doing that. At the end of the day, people will start knocking on our doors and finding what works for us, because we are so self-sufficient and we're working within ourselves. We're working with our own people to understand what we have and to appreciate what we have without cheapening ourselves. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Hannah Dadadegbola, calling from Ibadan. I'm so glad for how I got to join this very interesting discussion. I am a medical doctor, and I did some bit of pharmacognosy in my master's at master's level in the University of Ibadan. Sometimes I wondered why we just need the whites to accept us before we feel we are doing something great. In my research on a plant that I used for my master's program, I discovered that just one plant has a lot of activities in it. And in trying to dismember the herbs, looking for maybe the active ingredients, I come to realize that God puts some mixtures there to enhance activities, and some might lose this potency by dismembering them. And recently, when I read about palm oil, that researches, somewhere now is proving that palm oil is one of the best things that God has given to people. And I know how much we derided palm oil, that some families never used it to cook. Now, people, we are colonized to our brain. And that is the problem we have. And it pains me sometimes when I see so many herbs around my house, that now during my training, I found that they are very useful in managing a lot of diseases. Yes, the taste might not be too pleasant. Even some, the tastes are good enough. And we now wait till somebody encapsulated bitter leaf and now selling it to us as capsules before we recognize the fact that this thing works. Our parents live to 100 years and plus, and they are still agile and active. We consume all those things that are synthesized, and we die so young. And by 70, we are celebrating the person is old. In my town, in Ekiti, when you die at 70, you are too young to die. Sure. People say, I want to, yes, the metaphysical aspect of a traditional medicine, I don't go into it. I'm a Christian, and I don't want to go into that. But what I found out is that people put all those things to make it look as if it is those powers that make them work. In my dissertation, I came to understand that these leaves, they are created by God to work naturally. without anybody making any incantations on them, without any power, extra metaphysical power. They have their potency inherent in them. And so the people of old, the traditional herbalists, they made this thing look so in the dark, and created that mentality in many people, especially Christians, that any herbs now, it has to do with evil. It is not true. I came to realize that. I'm a doctor. I still use some plants for my personal healing and for treating myself. And sometimes I seek consent of patients who also may want to use the ones that I found useful to myself. So please, I think we need more of this debate and get people to really understand. Many people don't hate you. Don't like you when you say this thing works. I got something from somebody like a soap that I used to cure people of what's this thing called now? This thing that grow on wrist, and this lumpy thing. And the thing got cured. Just I make incision and I rub that the soap, and the thing got cured. And it's cured, which they would have required surgery. So please, our things are working. We don't need anybody to tell us they are working, or we are waiting for their affirmation, and that shouldn't continue to happen. We should be proud of ourselves. We are Africans. We have our traditional way of healing people. Yes, the myths can be removed. People believe you stepped on something when you have diabetic foot. Well, now we know better. And so I think we need to mix our knowledge of medicine and traditional healing and now come up with something tangible for the African nation. Thank you very much. Sorry to take your time.
Yeah.
Before you respond, sir, I would like Alare Milekun to please ask a question.
Thank you. My name is Alare Milekun Jolaifa. I was invited by my very good friend, Buki Fagbenle. And it's really good to have more of this quite often. I'm part of a group. Just a little description of what I do. I'm a medical herbalist. I'm part of a group on the internet of many practitioners. We have doctors, we have cardiologists, we have herbalists like me, we have our Babalawo, and we all come together. And this group was started by doctors because they were not getting people healed anymore. They were having problems. So they wanted to see how to incorporate herbal medicine and the spiritual part of it as well. And we are getting a lot of results, When the doctors come in to tell us about the anatomy and physiology, and they keep quiet, and then we herbalists will come in, to talk about the herbs and maybe the constituents of the herbs, and then the Yele will now come in to tell us how it's treated. And people have been coming in and they have been treated. We had a man with prostate cancer with a very, very high PSA, which was treated. We had a woman with alopecia, which was treated. We're having a lot of testimonies, And I just want to say something that we should not be looking at the West or looking at Oyinbo, and what one of our fathers said, that we have to take it to the Oyinbo and make money from it. I find that really offensive, because this is our heritage. This is what we should be keeping. These Oyinbo people have come to rape our lands and also to rape us as well. And then all we can do, they gave us their gods as well. And on top of it all, then we have to offer ourselves again, to go to them and be taking all our heritage, what belongs to us, what we should be keeping, what we should be using for ourselves, taking it to them because of money. I find that very, very offensive. So I think we should take that out of our system and try and utilize what we have and use it for ourselves alone. Yeah, I think that is all that I want to say for now. So I don't start keeping people on. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mal, for the question. And why I call on the speakers to respond. I'm also bothered about why knowledge of herbal medicine are being hoarded. As a researcher, when you go to herbalists, they keep hoarding and hoarding knowledge. We just had the testimony of shared by Dr. Anna Dada about how she was able to cure a woman of cancer thereabout. But how come all this knowledge are being hoarded? This is not obtainable in the Western society. Thank you. And please kindly respond, sir.
Yeah, sorry. So look, the knowledge is not hoarded at all. Far from it. Maybe you should ask yourself whether you are able to go through the normal procedure. Every Babalawo is ready to teach you. I was never a Babalawo, but I'm learning a lot because I had to go through the normal procedure. Every knowledge, for it to be valuable, must be secret first. Those who want to know it will now go through the procedure and they will know it serially, not, wholly like that. That's one fact. Then two, the idea of seeing is believing. In African ontology, seeing is not believing. You don't need to see. Let me tell you the truth, sir. We see nothing. Till now, we see nothing. What do we see? What we see is so insignificant to what is. And we have argued, even the reality that is in the virtual space, the virtual space is now even bigger than the physical space. So which means the reality itself, in fact, the more we locate reality within the spirit, the more we get into the true reality. That is my own answer to that question. Shango is never worshipped in African medicine. No way. Shango is only being venerated or being fed. Africans don't worship any god. They establish relationship with them to enable them harness their qualities to better their life, not that they worship them. Then Shango is not Alaafin of Oyo. No, Shango is the meeting of the eyes and the axe. That is Shango. That force that breaks the block in the sky into eye and fall. Oya is what that which spread it. That is Oya. Oya will spread it, so we break it. So that phenomenon, that energy is what becomes, a kind of Orisha in Yoruba cosmology. I want us to please understand that. Please. Then about bastardization, that exists everywhere. Even the doctors, somebody was given gold because gold, therefore that person died. People die everywhere, even in hospital. In fact, at UCH, people die more than those who live. I've always seen that the busiest place in UCH is the mortuary. So that somebody didn't cure a person of a problem does not mean he is a fraudster or a 419. No. Many people, many doctors are not able to cure a number of illnesses, even including malaria. So because somebody dies in that person's hospital does not mean that she is a 419. But at the same time, there are quacks, no doubt about that. And because it's not, the problem is there's no policy that guides the practice, no training school, no exposure, no connection of any kind. In such a system, there will be quackery. So I think the problem is that there's no national support, no ethical guidelines. Everybody just wakes up in the morning and practice it. So the problem is not those who practice it in that sense. It is the system that allows for quackery. I think other questions Dr. Otiko can answer.
All right, thank you so very, very much. Again, I'm glad that I was brought into this context, and I'm glad. I'm always very happy to speak alongside Professor Jegede. He's a big masquerade where I am. Now, bastardization. I work in Lagos State, and Lagos has a traditional medicine board where a 6 weeks training is given to those that have been practicing, not to teach them traditional medicine, but to help them to practice well, at least to bring some level of ethics to the practice. And so license is given, and they have the backing of the government. So that's one way to ensure that we reduce. As Prof said, there would always be those that are not doing very well. Now, divination is a process that is rigorous, that is long. And so when people say it's so shrouded in secrecy, as Prof said, it's not shrouded in secrecy. If you want to learn it, go through it for 10 years, and then you will learn it. I have not found someone who wanted to learn that was turned back. But when you get into a space and you want to know how things are done, I walked into a group of practitioners in Ibadan, and I was trying to bridge a gap between themselves and the people at UCH, and they almost walked me out. The reason why they almost walked me out was because they had been exploited before. And many of them think that all government wants is just to take what they have and throw them away. And they are speaking from experience. So when we speak about hoarding what they have, it is not because they don't want to help. It's just because they have been beaten over and over and they are reacting. Now, when we talk about, oh, you want to see something, I did a research on Egbe and Kanoko. Now, Egbe and Kanoko is still there. People can still do it. But they are not teaching it because of the abuse that can come from it. And so we shouldn't shy away from that. And for every example you gave about someone shooting at someone who has Okigbe and all of that, all those things exist. But you cannot entrust them into just anybody's care. And these are things that we must recognize. And thank you, Prof, for talking about Shango. There are primordial divinities, there are deified divinities. Primordial divinities are not the Oba, Shango, Koso. Now, let me just respond to decolonizing African medicine. Now, who defines how it is done? Who defines what is acceptable, what is not acceptable? How is putting bitter leaf into capsule decolonize medicine? We all grew up hearing an apple a day keeps the doctor away. How on earth did we not hear that eating away a bimoda can keep the doctor away? You know, these are things that have just been, I gave a paper just last week, and I said there's a smoke skin theory. A smoke skin theory covers all that is indigenous, and all it allows us to see are those things they have brought to us. And so we do not need to showcase anything. We only need to establish ourselves, get used to what we're doing. And of course, there are things we're not doing well yet. We're not keeping records. We're not hygienic enough. We're not doing some basic things. And yes, we will do. And that is the essence of this kind of engagement. Somebody, Buki getting a PhD in traditional medicine, going outside, you know, this will happen in due course. But we have so much going. As a round off, let me just give you this last story that is very real. Common abiri. And for those that know what abiri is, common, and I call it common, not because of what it is, but because of its availability. I gave it to one of my friends who lives in the US. And he says, I will take this thing because I'm going to do my blood culture in 2 months' time. And he took abiri in the morning and at night for 1 month, went to see his GP, and GP says to him, what exactly have you been doing? Whatever it is you have been doing, keep it up, because this is the best I have seen you. When he got back from his doctor, I said, did you tell him what you were taking? Your guess is as good as mine. He said, no, I don't tell her more, because if I tell her anything happen, you know, go do. That is exactly what happens to traditional medicine. This is not we're not about showcasing what we do not have, but it's just to do it the best way. And I finally would add that there is no method that does it all, even traditional medicine. Much as I admire and I promote it, it does not do everything excellently. And that is why we need to have the multiple methods and take the best of what each one has to offer. I haven't seen the one that offers holistic care as traditional medicine, but I have seen the ones that do a whole lot more diagnosis better than traditional medicine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was indeed a stimulating talk. And on behalf of the network, I appreciate everyone for your time, your contribution, and everything. We do not take it for granted. Our time is fast spent, and it's really worth it. So it's good to have you around. And while we try to call it today, the room is still open. Perhaps you want to discuss 1 or 2 things with any of the professors, or you want to network. We do appreciate that. On behalf of the network, I say thank you very much, and we hope to see you come September 4. We'll be having a seminar titled The Value of History of Humanitarian Medicine and Public Health Emergency Response in Africa. And we do try to disseminate this information very soon, and we hope to see everyone around. On behalf of the network, again, we say thank you to the speakers and to every participant. We so much value you, and we thank you for your time, for your participation, and we do not take this for granted. The room is still open. I hope we have a lovely day ahead. Bye.